showcase and they maintain that type of rehearsal schedule, well, the businesses along that corridor naturally benefit from that, and it may see a spark in revitalizing some other things as well.
That's good to hear. All right, I'm over my time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Parker.
It's good to see you all again.
Thank you.
I'll start with highlighting an event I went to, which was the Civil Rights at 60 event, which I thought was great. It highlighted several Ward 5 neighbors, and so kudos to that. Can you just detail the process behind an event like that?
So there's several different, well, I'll take the two events that happened. One that happened before that, which was our Art Bank finalists. That is a grant that is competitive, and there's a panel that's put together to understand who the city will be acquiring, who they'll be showcasing. And so you see works from people within a 50-mile radius of Washington, D.C. throughout both that gallery, then also we have a digital gallery. This particular civil works was civil rights, thank you. Civil rights exhibition was done in a way where there was also another panel put together, and they understood exactly what they were looking for as far as how they wanted to present this particular exhibit, and they they self-curated along with our new curator, which is one of the people we did hire, and they put together this particular
I thought
exhibit.
It was great.
And they reached out to people, of course, in the District of Columbia. And the difference is that we were not acquiring these particular works. And these works will go back to the artists. But we did pay these artists to participate, which is different from some other government.
Understood. I also wanted to come back to the discussion around the cap. And if you could put plainly the impact that it has had on organizations and your funding and work with organizations over this past year. I would note that I was part of the compromise last year in adjusting it to minimize the harm, but it seems like you're still finding that it's negatively impacting organizations that you're working with.
When we talk about the cap, I think sometimes we're getting, some people do get confused because there's several things, something that the mayor's office put on as far as the growth over the next 5 years, and there were caps to different people's budget. Those initially it was presented, those who made, I believe, revenue of over $250,000 or below would be capped by what they could get. The compromise happened to $115,000. What we began to see is that with limiting the type of support we could give to GOS from a 50% cap, we saw exactly what was happening with the full amount they were already getting. How were they doing outreach in the community? How were they able to reach their goals and reach the narrative in which they've already told us that they wanted to do to be able to carry out their duties?
Just more practically, because I'm mindful of the clock.
Right, of course.
Are there certain organizations that are not able to function?
I was going to say,
DC
we're collecting the data. At this point, it's somewhat anecdotal, but ward by ward, we're collecting the data to say.
And when might we be able to expect that?
I think
we've already sent, so we've sent, as we've met with some of the council members, we've already sent some of those by ward.
Yeah, we've done it by ward.
I think it's important to understand that although by ward there is an impact, the impact throughout all wards because of the limitations of how they've been able to conduct their work because of these particular cuts.
And I know, when can we get back to you?
Yes, we can get back to you.
Please do. Please do. I know part of the motivation behind the cap was a view that it's not healthy for an organization to be fully dependent on district funds in order to operate. What say you about that premise?
Well, it would be different if the District of Columbia had a thriving and giving private sector to arts organizations that are smaller. For instance, large art organizations have already established diversified revenue streams. They're coming from both federal partners or coming from larger corporations. If you are, say, an organization that's 5 years old or younger, if you do not have already, $1 million board with an already brick and mortar space, the likelihood of you having the ability to do true development work and raise that money is pretty much limited.
So it sounds like you're making an equity argument.
Yes. Yeah, accessibility is.
And I would add that some of that money, if it's spent for capacity building, if it's building your IT system, if it's creating an audience development program, if it's creating a marketing program, if it's soliciting new board members, that sort of stuff, that feel one time but have long-term benefits. So that is something that's really building to their additional capacity. It's not just paying a salary right now that then next year you have to pay again. So those sort of investments we focus on. We really want it to be capacity building so that it's something that's sustainable, not something that every year
Understood.
we'll have to come back to the trial.
And so if you had to make a recommendation to the council for changes, what might those recommendations include?
Well, we would ask that we would remove the 50% cap. That's a big part because what we have seen that what the chairman
And by
just said,
removing the cap, what would happen?
it would give us our opportunity to fund these organizations by what they've asked us to fund them, how they've asked us to
The
fund
scrutiny
them.
should be around how the money's being used,
Yes.
not how much money they're getting. So if you have identified those 5 or 10 real capacity building opportunities and limit the money to that, that is better than just limiting the amount of money.
Not only that, what we have seen from the evidence is that people have used the money for capacity building specifically, for development officers, and to hire those 1099 workers that help take their goals even further.
Yeah, I will be honest. The more I've thought about this and looked into it, I have questions about the impact of this type of cap, and I will be transparent in saying I think it's a bit paternalistic. And I have been asking my staff to look at what other agencies or organizations, independent or otherwise, do we provide this level of micromanagement into their budgets. And I'll leave it there, but it is certainly something I'll be looking into this budget cycle. And so if you could provide data that could tell the narrative around how this cap is negatively impacting organizations, that would be tremendously helpful.
By close of business tomorrow, we can give you the ward by ward breakdown.
I'm looking at the chart of the top 15 funded organizations, or the 15 organizations that received the largest grants from you all. There seemed to be a decline across the board in fiscal year 24 through 23, if I'm reading this correctly. And what is the reason for that?
So when you look at, you're looking at 24, if you look there, it says, in 23, it says including the $15,000 enhancement. Is that what you're referring to?
Yes.
So we have, that enhancement usually comes later in the year, so we do not yet know if we'll be able to provide those enhancements. So if once we provide those enhancements, they may be on par with what you see from 23 and 24.
Okay.
Yes.
I see my time ticking. Let me come here. So I did my homework and I talked to someone who sat on a panel for your grant selection process. Can you detail how you select individuals to sit on those grant selection panels?
Well, it's our goal to find panelists that are familiar with the disciplines. So the panelists are making some of the most fairest decisions so that the grantee gets the fairest process possible. We can't force people to participate. The one things that we do now as an incentive.
But do you cast a net out of
Yes.
those who previously received a grant,
Both.
or are they random individuals?
We look at those who have those who have previously received grants, those who have previously been panelists. We also look at subject matter experts. This is also used as an incentive for people to get into the process as well.
Okay, so part of the feedback that I received
Yes.
was that this individual was tapped last minute to sit on a panel to review 15 comprehensive applications, and they did not feel as though they could do it justice, and they were calling into question the process. Like,
Right.
the words they used was haphazard, and disingenuous. Now that might be strong, but that's why I'm asking, how do you review and identify the individuals to sit on the panel? Is there a time frame by which they need to be identified and have opportunities to review materials?
Well, it's a large time commitment to do, to panel these
Yes.
particular
Is there a
items.
time frame that they have to review applications?
It's, I believe, 2 weeks.
It's 2 weeks.
So they should have been identified 2 weeks in advance.
Well, not, panelists should have, you have 2 weeks to review the actual work.
Applications.
Before we launched the grant, we put the call out. So I think that what we have experienced is that in some cases, we do not get a large response. We, in every
So in an
commission meeting.
instance
yeah.
that it's not 2 weeks, that must have
Right.
been, we need to fill this slot
Right.
because we don't have
Yeah,
enough.
if I were to
Exactly.
hypothesize what probably happens, and we got to the moment that we got to get going, we didn't have enough people.
Right.
And so then we scurried to try to
So if I
get
could
some more
just
people.
quick follow up, and then my time is, why not then extend the review period to ensure that that individual and others could have a substantive review of the materials? You're giving out a lot of money, and to ask someone to make us a judgment in less than 24 hours,
Well, I don't.
per
I would-
their,
my-
per
my
their
hope-
feedback.
My hope is this is an outlier. Perhaps
Yes.
it isn't. I hope it is.
I hope it
Yeah.
is too.
And part of the, and I hear what you're saying, that part of the challenge is as you move things out, it interferes with the schedule going forward.
Yes.
Of being able to announce the grants and get the money out to people. So I hear you. We will put emphasis on making sure we don't fall into that trap, but I'm
Okay.
hoping that is an outlier as opposed to the norm.
And
Okay.
just for clarification, I don't believe it would have interfered with the 2 week, I think the 2 week review period is static. So they should have had 2 weeks to review. So if that was not the case, it was an outlier.
They did not. They're
Okay.
saying, and I'm trying not to give out too many
Understand.
details so you can't identify who it is, but they had less than 24 hours to review 15 comprehensive proposals. I'm
I
over my
think that's an
time.
outlier. I'm pretty sure that's an
Okay,
outlier.
thank you.
But still, it shouldn't happen. So we appreciate the feedback, and we'll
yes.
make sure that we avoid
Okay.
those situations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Parker. There was some testimony that I'm looking at. In terms of process, we request a return to the timeline of spring notification of the intended funding amount for the GOS grant. Prior to the pandemic, this occurred in April or May, allowing us to budget for the next fiscal year. In recent years, we've not been notified until September. We fully support the implementation of, that's a different point. So this was a complaint about timing. There was some other testimony about grants coming late, which I think means maybe this year could have come out in October, but are just now getting received. Can you speak to this?
Yes, the awards are announced in October. And so each, as far as how we award the grants, each individual grantee, time is spent to not only pull their paperwork together, make sure they're in full compliance. So of all 1,200 plus grants that we put out, each one is handled individually. Coming into the agency, it's been my goal to upgrade the system. We still use a paper system that's very somewhat tedious. This particular year, with an increase of awardees and not enough staff to kind of match that, it took longer than what we would have desired for it to happen. As far as when the award is announced, we, over the last, I believe, 2 or 3 years, the awards have been announced at one meeting in September, that the full commissioners vote on at that particular time. There may have been time beforehand when those awards were announced, maybe at different stages throughout the year. After this past year, we did discuss in our grant revamping something or the way to make these announcements where it would give grantees more time to plan if they knew that they could be anticipating or expecting award. We saw that also may positively impact the staff as they are trying to work through getting the awards processed in a timely manner. So we will have some updates on that, hopefully going forward.
That seems to be somewhat at odds with what this person testified. Maybe they got it wrong. We request a return to the timeline of spring notification of the intended funding amount of the GOS grant.
That's what I addressed. I think a few years ago, the way the awards were announced may have been staggered throughout the year. over the last few years, the awards have been voted on at the September meeting, and the announcement comes in October. After this past year, we did have a grant revamping to discuss how those grants not only were rolled out and paneled, and then how we announce those awards. We will know, I guess, here within a few months if the way we make those announcements will only be held in September, or if some of those announcements can come earlier. So we have discussed this internally, but I was not at the agency when the announcements were made and the award announcements were made back in April or in the spring or something of that nature.
I'd like for us to follow up with you on that.
Sure. I mean, what's going through my mind is that maybe it depends upon, I mean, this person doesn't indicate anything about phasing or rolling out at different time periods, which is what you were saying, Mr. Myers. But, you know, maybe this is dependent on the organization's fiscal year. So for organizations whose fiscal year is, let's say, July 1st, a spring notification works for them. Why would they be notified the preceding fall? And for organizations, did I get that wrong? Maybe I got that a little
No, I hear where
messed
you're
up.
coming from. There's been a few of the bids who want to do public art, and their fiscal years are like July to July or September to September, what have you. And so that's one of the concerns that were brought to us before that led to us discussing it in our grant revamping. And so we
But
are
let's
determining.
get back to him
Yes.
specifically on that. We'll get back to you on that.
Okay. In the pre-hearing questions that I sent you, one of the questions had to do with employee bonuses. Provide a list of employee bonuses. This is question number 6. And identify the employee, the amount, and the reason for the bonus or special pay. And the table that you provided gives the name, the bonus amount, and then says one-time bonus paid pursuant to the legislation. I have no idea what that is.
I believe that I think the legislation that gave us the ability to provide the bonus in the first place.
And what
but we can
legislation
get
would
back
that
to you-
be?
But we can get back to you on that.
Okay. And Councilmember Parker touched on this. There was question 35, the general operating support top 15 table.
Say that again.
Question 35, this was an attachment. Question 35 was general operating support top 15 table. So I just want to understand these tables, these columns. So FY24 has an amount. FY23, the preceding 3 years have an amount, and then says including, well, for FY23, it says including $15,000 enhancement. The other 2 years, it just says including enhancement. This table reflects for each of these organizations the total general operating support. Let's be clear about that. That's correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then what is the $15,000 enhancement for
The
FY23?
$15,000 enhancements, we realized that we did have later in the year some money that we could offer for enhancements for all of the art organizations. And so it was a flat rate of $15,000. So we gave it across the board.
And so every one of these organizations got a $15,000 enhancement.
Yes.
So if I took 15,000 from 213, that's the top one.
Yes.
That's what the award, initial award was, and then the 15,000 brings it up
Yes.
to 213. Now, for FY22 and 21, it doesn't say 15,000. Was there an enhancement in each of those years?
Yes, I'm not positive if these were
There are enhancements, but the amounts weren't necessarily a flat
15,000.
rate. It differed.
But there were enhancements.
There were
in each of
enhancements,
those.
yeah.
I think I had one other table I had a question about. Give me a second. How much time did you put me on 10? Actually, let me turn to colleagues, see if they have any other questions. Councilmember Henderson?
Thank you. Director Myers, you mentioned in your testimony that the expansion of the grant process, or that you all were able to grant more to organizations who had actually never received funding from the commission before. Do you have a breakout of that? So of the 34 million that you all granted, how many of them went to new awardees in FY23?
Yes, we can get that to you.
Okay. It would also be very interesting to sort of see the demographics in terms of the ward breakdown of where those organizations are.
I'll just add, when we approve it at the commission level, they give us a chart for each category of what money was new, what money was grantees, prior grantees, and which wards it went to. So we have that data. We can get that to you very easily.
Okay, great.
And you'll provide it to the committee as well?
Yes, yes.
Great. As a sort of a follow-up to the line of questioning you were having with Councilmember Parker around the grant process in general, on average, after the board has already voted to approve the recommendations from the panels, how long does it take for the funding to get out?
So the way, I think it's as a bit of a nuanced question, simply because since we have been given the dedicated tax, that has not matched. The dedicated tax was given, then the pandemic happened. So then that changed the way announcements were done because it was done around an emergency type of level. Now we have returned to somewhat of normalcy. And so we have an increased amount of grantees with a less amount of staff, a different amount of staff. So in years past, people may have remembered that they may have gotten their awards by December. But they were getting awards without this amount of grantees being awarded. So if we were look at where we are on par with the just simple amount of grants that we've gotten through our agency, we're on par with where we are last year. However, we have an additional 200 grantees that are being awarded than they were last year. So our goal is to digitize our system and be able to have grants that are out before the new year. But we are not sure what that looks like quite yet.
All right, so let's talk about digitizing the system.
Yes.
What's the plans for the RFP for a new system? Or does it require, when you say we're digitizing our system, does that require a new system?
It would require a new system. What we've done, we've looked at the current system we use now. It's called Jungle Lasers. We've looked at the current system that we're using, and we've had meetings with them to see, based upon the needs of both the grant managers and how they operate the system, and feedback we've gotten from our grantees as far as the user experience, and looking at also how we cooperate with our sister agencies who are also in that process. We've sent them a list of questions, and we've also identified other grant systems that are used by state art agencies across the country to see what systems are being best used by them, and seeing in that process what could we possibly adopt here in our particular agency.
Okay. So you're hopeful to work with the same vendor and just make some modifications?
Well, we're hoping to work with a vendor that better suits the needs of the agency. It may be the same vendor, it may be another vendor, so we're not positive quite yet.
Okay, so what are the plans? Is it a plan to make this change this fiscal year so you're ready for October, or is this a 2025, 2026 project?
This would be a 2025 project when it would be probably fully implemented. What we've looked to do is to see what could we pilot and what could we do without disrupting the experience of the grantees and the users out in the community in the best way. So we wanted to see what can we do to see what works best for our agency, what would be a good user experience for our grantees, and we wouldn't do that with the entire disrupting the entire Apple Cart.
Well, we experienced the whole diffs issue.
Yeah.
And it was launched before it was tested well.
Right.
And we don't want to do that again. So
Right.
there will be a trial period, a test period. But I'll say one of the automations we're thinking of, we will do, I'm pretty sure. Right now, all of our documents have to be signed by a person manually,
Okay.
as opposed to a DocuSign process. I mean, it's a simple thing, but it makes up so much time in the process we do. So those are the sort of things that we want to do in a comprehensive way.
Okay. I would love to check in on how that's going later this
Absolutely.
fall in terms of whether or not some of these changes are helping to expedite. Obviously, having more bodies, well, having more bodies that are working, I got to clarify because sometimes you can have a body and they're just there, would certainly help in terms of this process. And we can work through that with the chairman in terms of, I guess, relaxing the restrictions. Although I'll admit, in the documents that I've seen, I haven't seen what you all have seen in terms of restrictions saying you can only have X number of managers. But we can sort of work through that. I want to go back to sort of this conversation around economic development, and not just in downtown, but sort of the revitalization, how arts has been a spark in terms of what's happening across the board. I had the opportunity to go to DC Jazz Fest this past year, and I have never seen so many people standing in the heat, excited to hear a jazz soloist in that heat. And are you all working with other organizations to try to sponsor similarly large-scale festival-type deals? I know, obviously, Chair Lee, you have a particular interest in bringing in an Art Basel type of event. Some people aren't necessarily into the studio mixed arts type of art, but music festivals are things that.
Yeah. Before our executive director responds, our vision for this Art Basel type thing is several genres. It's visual arts, it's performing arts, it's culinary arts, it's fashion. So we want to pick up. It is not just, and so it is better than Art Basel because it's not just the visual arts. That's the plan.
Okay.
So.
What we were looking to do, the commission before the pandemic did a type of festival at the Lincoln Theater that showcased music. And so we're looking to this year do a hip hop type of culture.
Oh, for the 50th anniversary.
Right. Doing outreach to that community because we feel that more outreach in that community we could see more interaction and work with members of the community and our commission as well. So that is one of the things. But we've supported, I think, HR Records. They did their festival, which is jazz, and that's in Ward 4.
Okay.
And we are, again, a supporter of DC Jazz Festival itself. So we are looking to do other festivals and looking at how we can support other fashion shows as well. You know,
In fairness, historically, we have funded in some form or fashion. We want to move to really partnering with them in a more substantive way.
Okay.
That's our plan.
That sounds good. To what extent, well, let me back up. So the fact that you guys were able to grant to more than, 200 organizations or 200 more additional grantees, I have to imagine that's in part due to word getting out that, one, the commission is available and funding exists. What did you do differently this past year than you did in previous years around, call for applications or marketing around the commission?
I can start. There are two things we did. We hired more events and communications people.
Okay.
So the people knew we were out there. And we went out into the community. We physically went out in the community. But also, I think, in fairness, and I'm not saying this because I've just been chair for 2 years, but the historical reputation of this agency by some was that don't waste your time, it's not going to happen. And so there are people that just gave up on applying. And there's a different narrative now, and people are now wanting to come to us. So some of it is us going to them, some of it is dispelling the mythology about our wanting to be helpful to those organizations.
Also, to those who came and did apply, the way we conducted our panels, we tried to be more equitable. So say that this is, in years past, you may have a first-year grantee, someone who is just applying, a first-year applicant against a 15-year applicant. And so, of course, the 15-year applicant has more nuance and knows exactly what's needed. But this year, we saw more first-year applicants paneled against one another, which made it more stronger and competitive from that standpoint.
So even just that, those types of adjustments throughout the process can help. And no one is saying that that's an unfair advantage, but it does make sense to me that a first year versus someone who's it's like putting a freshman versus a senior.
Right. And if I could credit our grant managers, a lot of these suggestions came from them.
That's
the
great.
Stuff they kind of wanted to do always, but didn't feel as though they could even suggest things like that. So it's not any earth-shattering sort of findings, just things that make common sense, but you wouldn't have known if the people doing the work didn't suggest it.
Yeah,
Right. All right. I'm out of time. Thank you so much.
thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Parker?
I wanted to come to grants. For all of the recipients of fiscal year 24 grants, have they received funding or the money?
Not all of them have received money.
Can you give me a breakdown of how many?
We can get that, I can get that to your office and to the whole committee, yes.
Okay. Do you have a sense? Is it the majority, half, less than half?
A majority have, I would say that it's a bit nuanced because those, we know that I believe 965 have completed everything out of our agency, which leaves maybe 130, 200 more that would need to still leave our agency. And of that number, I believe 600 may have received their purchase orders, but after it leaves our agency, there's a bit of ownership that the grantee themselves have to take on, meaning they need to sign up with DIFs. Again, there's only 4 DIFs managers that are able to offer assistance.
Receive the money, but it's not necessarily because of
Right.
Right,
Right.
right,
your agency.
right,
That is helpful.
Right.
right.
And yeah, if you could follow up just with how many individuals are still pending payment,
Yes.
that would be great. And it's worth asking, are there any individuals or recipients from fiscal year 23 that are still outstanding?
We can get that information
Okay.
for you as well. And sometimes the pending payment may be due to things like clean hands. So what this agency does that's more in-depth than what other agencies do when it comes to grants, we walk our grantees really through it. So before, like, say that you apply to us for a grant, we help you, we make sure that you have your clean hands and the clean hands is up to date. Make sure you have your insurance. Make sure you have your business license. All those things that traditionally you may have to pull on your own.
Understood.
And then navigate the system. We do it for you.
Understood. There has been discussion before about board members receiving grants. Is that the case?
So when our grants go before any before any committee or before the general body, commissioners are asked to recuse themselves. So we do ask for letters of conflict. So we know
Are
where the
current
conflict is.
commissioners receiving grants?
Yes, some of their organizations may receive grants.
And can you give a breakdown of which
We can give
commissioners and organizations?
Yes, we can.
How many commissioners are there?
Currently, we have
10 now.
10. Yeah.
And how many commissioners are linked with organizations receiving
I think
grants?
2, maybe 3.
Maybe 3.
But in
Yeah.
the selection process, they recuse themselves,
Yes.
is what
I mean,
you're
if I
saying.
wanted to
blind.
take back, when we do the panels, we try to have a commissioner to sort of moderate the panel, but they don't vote or anything like that. When an organization they're associated with comes for discussion, they go off the video.
I get
And they
that.
only come back in. So, and then the voting of that.
And I'm a bit
they-
torn here, right? Because art is art, and because of my service may not necessarily mean my organization shouldn't benefit.
Right.
At the same time, it does seem inappropriate that a commissioner would sit on a board, and even if they're not in the room when the vote happens, there's influence, there's association, there's reputation that could influence other commissioners. So it would be helpful for me to just get a better sense of the extent to which commissioners are benefiting from grants.
Absolutely. And also know that, like, before, there's a blind element. So,
I was going to step
go
to
ahead,
the, it starts at the panels. And in the panels, though we may sit in the room, we're not a part of the discussion. We're just making sure they do things, no untoward things. And when our particular organization is discussed, we get off the discussion. We don't hear it at all. Then once it goes to the grant committee members get to vote on what's happened there. But those people are not associated with any of those organizations. For the blocks that we're talking about, if your organization, then you can't participate at all. When it comes to the full commission, it's blind.
you don't know.
So we don't know who it is. And we've had some commissioners who just always recuse themselves because they don't know if their organization's in or not. So to be safe, they say,
Understood.
The
Understood.
challenge, though, is it's hard to find someone who is really dedicated to be a volunteer as a commissioner who's not associated with the arts. So it's going to be difficult for us if we decided that we only want people that are not associated with the organizations. I resigned from all of my boards when I took this chairmanship.
So why not force all commissioners to do that?
I resigned.
Why not force commissioners to do that?
I'm not sure if I think
Well,
across.
let me start with, we don't
Or
put
how
the-
about this
we don't
as a-
put the commissioners on.
how about this-
The mayor and you all do. right?
Fair enough. How about this as a compromise? We remove the cap with the expectation that no commissioners serve on organizations that receive grants. I'll let you think about it.
Yeah, no,
I want to keep
but
going.
once again, the mayor makes the appointment and you all approve. So we get people. We have no input into that.
Yeah, and maybe
That's not true.
maybe the
we can offer
expectation is that the council should not approve individuals that have business before the commission. And I will tell you honestly, I'm not even up to speed on which or how many commissioners are receiving grants. This isn't a personal thing for me. I will say it does strike me as odd, and I would imagine it probably strikes you as odd, which is why you recused or stepped down from
I didn't
organization.
want the drama, so I
I
just.
understand. I understand.
I left a number of organizations very unhappy, but that's what I
I
did.
understand. Let me keep going because my time is ticking. I'm going to shift gears. You all are providing a subset of grants for go-go artists. I think this is great, both because of the equity of it, but also the recognition that go-go is the art form of DC. So in the pre-hearing responses, though, it seemed just we are giving numbers that there were 13 applicants and 10 awardees, but I don't have any
Which
information.
question?
I'm sorry, this is page 30 of 76. This is question 44. You're giving a breakdown of how many applicants and awardees are linked to this very specific grant, which I imagine is for just go-go artists. Can you provide more information about who those 10 individuals
Yes.
or groups are? I would
Yes.
like to know. Just
That's fine. Yes,
yeah.
we can. And also know that we're working to, there's been a call in the community for a type of go-go touring grant. What we've seen that when go-go acts travel throughout domestically.
Yep.
They travel as a big band in essence, and so.
And
the
that's
cost-
actually what I'm interested in. When
Yeah.
I was trying to find more information to see, are these individuals, are these groups, how much money?
Right.
And again, I support it, and I think this is important that we provide this money for go-go. I just would like more information about
Yeah, we can
the,
get you
the
that
grants
information.
themselves. Okay. You talked a little bit about the challenges with diffs, and what I think I heard you say is that you're expecting everything to be fixed by 2025. Is that right?
No, those are two different. So with diffs, we are subject to whatever the OCFO's office does with diffs. We're looking internally at how we improve our systems. And what we didn't want to do was to launch upon our grantees a beta system, similar to what we saw happen to us with diffs. So what we're looking to do is some type of a control group and to make sure both user experience, grantee experience, and agency experience would work with whatever system we saw that would be improved. And then once we have tested that, we're cool with that, then we would then implement it with our grantees. But
Okay.
there's no, I don't want to cause any alarm, there is no current upheaval or change that will be happening until we know that we have an improved system to provide.
And then two final questions. VTech Solutions, you hired them for staffing support.
Yes.
What type of staffing support?
They helped us a great deal with, since we were short of grant managers, they helped us with the supporting that particular, our grant staff. So we have now, I believe, 4 current VTech contractors that support our grants team completely. And it helped a great deal. We had some grant managers that had to go on paternity leave, for instance. They were able to step in and take
Got
on
you.
that load and so on and so forth.
And so because of your view of not being able to hire more grant managers, I'm assuming you lean more
Yes.
into them. And that is something we can look into.
But it's not a perfect solution.
No.
The contractors can't do the work like
Right.
someone who is there and understands it. It's better than nothing, but
Yes.
it was not perfect.
Okay, I'm going to end here, and I wasn't going to. So, not to put you on the spot, Aaron, do you receive any grants from the commission?
No.
Would you be eligible to receive any grants?
Would I be eligible? I would be eligible if I wanted to receive an artist grant, possibly. If I wanted to apply, I could apply for one.
Okay. So my recommendation, and I share this respectfully, is that I think there's some ambiguity there between the executive director, the commissioners, and just what the grant process looks like and means. Again, I'm torn. I do get that this is a very specific community, and funding is hard to come by for all the reasons you mentioned, especially for Black and brown artists.
Right.
At the same time, it does, again, I'm going to use the word odd, strike me as odd that commission officials are in the same pool as a go-go band or artists, and that just seems a bit unfair.
I will say this, I have not applied, nor would I be
No,
applying
I
for it.
know.
Just for
But
the public.
I just
who's
wanted,
watching.
and thank you for that
Yes.
clarification. I wanted to just get a better sense of where the boundary is drawn.
Right.
And it doesn't seem like there is any boundary, which is, again, my recommendation. I think you all should draw boundaries, both for the executive director, but also for commissioners. And what are the rules of engagement there? But I want to end on a positive note. Thank you all for your testimony. I am a huge believer in the arts and you all's work in this space. As I started out, I really enjoyed the Civil Rights at 60 event. I've enjoyed many other events, and anything I can do to support this community and thriving, as well as the commission, I'm happy to do that.
Thank you. And come tomorrow. You all should have invites. If you
And I'll be looking out for that information. So you can share it with the committee as well as with me. That is information about the top funders. That's information about the impact of the cap on organizations citywide. That's information about the commissioners and which commissioners are connected to organizations that are receiving grants, the size of those grants, and then information about the go-go bands and the size of those grants.
Thank you.
And you'll provide copies to
The entire committee.
the committee.
Yes.
To go back to the recusal issue, do you, where there's a grant request that involves a commissioner, do you pull that grant request out of the package, so to speak? Because my understanding is you vote on grants as a package
At which stage?
before the commission.
So the final vote?
Correct.
So by the time it gets to the final vote, that's the recommendation that's come from the grants committee. So you're.
Well, it's
you're-
blind. It's
yeah,
just, it's just
blind, yeah.
numbers. There are
You-
no, but some of the commissioners, because they're concerned,
Self-recuse.
have recused themselves. They say, they don't even know if they're in there or not. So just in case they recuse themselves.
I'm
So-
not clear. So in
So it's
the
an entire
council,
package,
what
yeah.
we do, for example, is we have a consent agenda. We may vote on 50 legislative measures in one vote. If Councilmember Parker has a conflict of interest with one of the measures, he pulls it off the consent agenda, so it's voted on separately, and then he recuses himself. It doesn't sound like that's the practice you have.
It's because the commissioners in the meeting don't know who's in the block of people being considered. They
Well,
don't
but they
know.
do know they're an applicant.
Sometimes they don't.
They don't know if they're an applicant.
No.
Well, if they don't know they're an applicant, then they probably don't have a conflict of
Oh,
interest.
yeah, right, because their development person did it, their grants writer did it, they just don't know. But some of those people in that case, just in case, recuse themselves.
What we have found is that you don't know who you know until at the end of, once something goes, but there are people who have recused themselves from certain votes because they just realized that maybe someone they hired a year ago for something else now is a part, they know someone who's a part of that. So
But what I'm
DC's
hearing is the process should be clearer than that.
Yes,
And
yes.
it's easy for me to say because I did it myself, right? So I think if the mayor's office and the city council required for candidates coming onto the commission to remove themselves from organizations to be considered, that's up to you all.
Yeah.
We take whatever commissioners you give us. Now, I can control with the executive director, but we take whatever commissioners you give us.
All right, but that wasn't my line of questioning. It was what is actually presented to the commission, or how it is presented.
No names of the organizations, just numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's it. In the panel, people know, but that's where we recuse ourselves in the panel. And in the grants committee, it's known, but we don't have grants committee people that are part of those organizations. So that we've tried to make it as clean as possible. But by the time it gets to the full commission,
Well, I'll
we don't know.
repeat how we do it, which is like I used the example of the consent agenda. For one thing, we don't just have numbers like Bill 25-1, 25-2. We actually say what it is. And if Councilmember Parker, not to pick on him a second time in this example, but if he knows that he might have a conflict of interest, well, I'll put it differently. If he knows that there is a conflict of interest, he asks that it be removed and he recuses himself. So it's voted on separately, and it's voted on separately with him knowingly and intentionally and discreetly, in the sense that it's only that one issue, is recusing himself.
I mean, what we certainly could do is we could alert the commissioners of the organizations that are in the queue, not how much money, but just those names. Then I can say, oh, these two, and then we could recuse that way. We could do that process. That's not been the historical process in the commission, but I hear a concern, and I had that personal concern, and that's why I resigned from those organizations.
One other question. Can we, the FY24 grants charts that you provided in the pre-hearing answers, could you provide that in Excel format?
Okay.
That's going to conclude this hearing. Thank you all. We'll see you, I put away my schedule.
Thank you. Thank you
We'll
very much.
see you on March 29th.
Thank
The
you.
time is 1:23 and this hearing is adjourned.
Thank you.